Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. You are listening to Lurie Daniel Favors here on SiriusXM's Urban View, where talk empowers and becomes action. You guys know I am fascinated by stories all across the country about education gone wrong, and particularly education that is being scripted or structured or resisted in ways that are designed to make a particular segment of our population feel a little bit better about American history. Well, today we have a parent joining us for this hour who is going to help us talk about the other side of that conversation. Craig McNary is the parent of 3 children between the ages of 12, 10, and 5. He is a retired Army veteran and a former educator. He works in several community groups to include the Round Rock Black Parents Association, ACT, which stands for Anti-Racist Coming Together, and 100 Black Men of Austin. Mr. McNary, it is a real pleasure to have you here with us today, particularly for a topic like this one. So thank you for joining us this morning.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So before we get into the specifics of your immediate area of focus, can you talk with us about the Round Rock Black Parents Association? Was this an organization that was formed in response to the current onslaught of attacks against diverse education, or were you already a pre-existing organization?
So Round Rock Black Parents started in response to a 2015 incident where a 14-year-old boy who was Black was chokeslammed by an officer on campus. Yeah. That was the impetus to get Black parents to start to organize and come together. At that time, I was still working in the district that this happened in, not on my campus, but I was still working in the district. And this was, it wasn't surprising that it happened. Since then, the organization's grown, the reach has grown. Obviously, I think this is like the third, like national interview the organization has had. And it's really just because of how we've come together as mothers, fathers, and community members at large to kind of start fighting this fight, all from one incident of a young man being handled way too roughly for what was involved.
Now, when you say it wasn't a surprise that incident happened, why was it not a surprise for you? Because when I heard it, I said, "Oh, that's troublesome." But you say that as though this was something that was sort of a part of an already existing environment for Black children. Is that the case, or did I misread that?
Well, you got to read into the fact that I'm an Army vet, and I've been teaching, and I've grown up in Texas. It's not surprising for me. For some people, it's alarming. It's not any less tragic in my mind. I don't think it's any more appropriate because it's not alarming. I just feel like I'm not surprised in the climate and the system that we are in that this happens. It's not surprising given that at that time there were officers like contracted from the city to work there. So their training and their point of view was well in place before that incident happened. Yeah.
Now, with regards to that incident in particular, what was it about that incident, particularly if this is something that, might have been more a part of a longer pattern? What was it about that incident that caused it to be so galvanizing that you all decided that something had to be done and that something was creating this organization?
Well, let me tell you, I wasn't there at that point. I just feel like it was the needle that it was the needle in the haystack that just kind of like, okay, yeah, I got pricked by this now, and it's just time to motivate people to get up and move. And that's what, the founders of the organization really, really felt in that moment. I mean, the core founding group was a lot of mothers, a lot of Black mothers. And they were just done. Enough was enough. And it was time to motivate and move.
So one of the reasons that I'm curious about the origin story is because we get a lot of calls from people who have experienced tragedy in education, who are defending their children, who are concerned about the way their children are being mistreated. And a lot of them feel that this is wrong, like you know, that needle in the haystack that pricked them, the straw that broke the camel's back, whatever label you want to put on it, they are crystal clear. Something must be done, but yet not all of those parents then go about the work of organizing to actually create a systematic response. So was it just that these were mothers who had had enough, or what was it? Because there has to be something that takes you from, let me call up the radio show and complain about this thing that happened, to, after I get off this phone call, I'm going to go organize with the other parents in my community, and we're going to sit in a room together and we're going to hash out a plan. Can you talk to us through, and I know admittedly you said that you were not involved at that particular phase, but based on what you know of the organization, what were some of those earlier steps? What were some of the challenges that those initial parents faced? And how has grappling with those initial challenges helped you all to continue to flourish these many years later? Because 2015, we're not talking about, yesterday. We're talking about a group that has now got some roots and some time underneath itself. So talk with us about that process.
So the passion of a mother is like nothing else. I will tell you
Facts.
that. And there were also educators involved. There were people involved who just had different stakes in the ground at the time, and they all coalesced. And they had to deal with their differences. No one person is the same, and just because you share the same demographic as somebody doesn't mean you agree on processes, procedures, or thoughts.
Right.
The central focus came to be children. And that is why there were mothers, fathers, educators who may not have had children at the time or what have you. People were just concerned about children. And I can tell you there's not anything more galvanizing than the welfare of children. And that, as the central impetus and focus, is what allowed the group to go beyond just saying, hey, this isn't right, or let's call and tell people about this. It was, what do we do? What do we do to get together? What do we do to unify the community within the community and try to have impact? And it is just amazing what started as something like, what if we did this? And it was a lot of question asking. It was a lot of learning. It was a lot of reaching out and calling to other groups and other people who had done things similar before. And really it was the respect of what they didn't know and what they wanted to accomplish. Because that's key. When you want to do anything you haven't done before, knowledge acquisition is highly important, which is why it's hard to reconcile this group, how we wouldn't have joined in the fight to stop people from trying to ban books. Because
I love that.
Where do you hide information? In books.
Right.
And if you can hide the book, you hide the information completely. I mean, it's you can't stop Black folks from reading anymore. You can't make it illegal anymore. So what's the next step? Logically is let's just get rid of books and only leave the books around that we want them to read. Only leave the stories around that we want them to know.
So talk with us then about how it came to be that you were able to focus on these particular areas. We've seen all across the country massive efforts to really ensure that, as you said, even though we can't stop y'all from reading, we can control what it is you have access to. We can control the dialogue in the classroom. How did that show up in your community?
We have some very spirited people out here, I will say, that have very uninformed opinions and ideals. They read an excerpt from a book, they got excited, and they were like, this has to be banned. And in their good version of Christendom in their head, they were like, this is exactly what needs to happen, because this is just an affront to Christendom, as if truth is not a part of that whole dogma. And it just became this kind of infant-like push, just all yell and no reason, all crying and no no impetus for it at all, except for, oh, Johnny hit me and I don't like it. Let's get rid of this book. And it came to bear that it brought a lot of the ignorance to light in the fact that the person who was raising the issue of banning a book hadn't even read the book.
Oh, wow.
Took a small excerpt out of context, which is so easy to do, right?
That's right.
And
I mean, we could do that with the Bible. You mentioned Christian. Like we see it done with religious texts all the time. That's
yes,
right.
yes. Oh, there are so many verses I can think about right now off the top of my head. Um, but it just came to the light that this person was just upset about this and overly tender in their fragility and decided they needed to do something about it. And
And what did
it
that
was
something
evident.
look like? Were they trying to ban a book? Were they
Oh
trying to
yes,
limit
yeah.
classroom
They were
activity? What did their campaign look like?
they were trying to ban the books, the remix. It was just a book with a central Black character. It had real life stuff in it, stuff that Black children and adults go through.
Right.
And the gentleman didn't like it. And I use the word gentleman loosely. The gentleman didn't like it. Raised a complaint at the school district and kept pushing it each step further until it got to like a board level incident.
Now,
Every
was this a
time,
person? I just want to interject here. Was this a person who was working in isolation? Were they also gathering other parents who were in agreement with them? What did their efforts at banning these books? How did that show up for your community?
oh my gosh, yeah, they don't work in isolation. They are
Mm,
wide and all outside. They are they're all the way in collusion in the open because it's okay for them. Um,
right,
it doesn't look like anything other than normalcy for them to do this.
right.
And he had the backing of his community, and they were there for it.
And
Unfortunately, logic wasn't there for it, so they lost that fight.
now we have seen where people who have zero logic and no real we've seen that be successful before, Mr.
Yes,
McNary. So I not
yes,
having logic has not necessarily been a barrier to
no.
successful campaigns in the past. And so but what I'm trying to tease out for the audience is really what was it so significant, because you guys have a very different response. We have seen success after success after success from these folks who, like you said, have very little logic, read an excerpt, and then organize an entire campaign where they get ready, willing, and able neighbors who may not even have children in the schools. But they get these neighbors who are able to join with them. They go to these PTA meetings. They are very loud. They've got signs. And logic has never been a prerequisite for successfully discrediting their efforts. I need to know, and the audience needs to know, what was it about y'all that ended up creating such a different outcome? Because your story, this is being able to successfully push back against organized ignorance is a lesson that all of us need a bit more of. So I'm trying to figure out, what was it about y'all that saw that happening, as you have seen it happening all across the country, that she was like, nah, son, what we not doing is this, and then successfully resisted it.
It was really the counterpoint and the calm in the storm of ignorance is what it
Mm,
was. We had to appeal to the reality of it. We called on people in the field like librarians. There's no group of people who are more revolutionary than librarians. You
mm.
look at them and you say these people are quiet and they're meek and they just sit in a room full of books all day. That is the foundation of revolutions. You have to call on these
Wow.
educators who are just embedded in the ammo that you need to fight ignorance, which is knowledge, which is experience, which is other people's points of view. And librarians, I think, are slept on as far as how revolutionary they are, because what do
Wow.
you do when you don't want thought to flourish anymore? You take
You
out the
close
root
some
of youth thought.
libraries.
Yeah, you
It's
torch a
getting
library, you have a book burning. And 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 when you call on these people, oh my gosh, they are so ready, able, and willing to step up. And let me tell you, a lot of our librarians in Round Rock ISD are white women. A lot of them are.
mm,
But let me tell you something else. That doesn't matter to them because they are proponents of knowledge.
wow.
They have spent too much of their lifetime. Look, when you and you know this as a professional you are, right? When you spend your time studying something, it repatterns your brain on how it works, how it thinks, and how it views everything. Right? It changes how you think about the world because your lens is now shaped by everything you've learned, by the methods you've learned, and all of that. And so now these librarians are now here for it. When it comes to saying, we're going to get rid of books, librarians are like, wait a minute. So if you get rid of one, you're going to start getting rid of this one and this one and this one. And what are we doing? It's just embedded in their psyche now that books are important. Books are something that are just alive for us to be alive in a better way. And that was a big part of it. You know, we engage the professionals who do this. You know, when you go to war, you don't hire a bunch of bakers, you hire soldiers. You know, if you want to run a race team, you hire good mechanics and a good driver. If you want to combat people who are trying to take away books, talk to librarians. Talk to educators who understand what's important. And that was a big piece of the puzzle. It was also, we have this wonderful diverse group of people. And when I say diverse, I don't mean that we're all from a different racial background and different economic points. I mean, we have different thoughts. We have different ways to engage things, and we are open. I think one of our biggest strengths is that we really embrace grace, empathy, and compassion as a group for one another, where we come from. And that allows us to just be effective. And we can have conversations to where we come there and we're coming at different points. And at the end, we're going to coalesce to find out, all right, what's the best way? What's the best team to put here? What's the best team to put here? And let's focus these people on this. And that's what we did. It was straight up how to organize. It was, what tools do we need for the job? And let's be humble. Let's try to put ego aside and let's focus on what the mission is, because the mission is our babies.